Hey everybody, it's Katie. Today I want to talk about feeding your little. So if you are pregnant and about to have a baby, or if you have a brand new baby, then this video is for you. Today we're going to talk about breastfeeding, bottle formula feeding, and also we're going to touch just a little bit on first solids for baby. So if you fit into any of those categories, today's video is for you. All right, friends, so as we go through the video today, if you hear something that you think is worth sharing, I would be honored if you would consider sharing it with any of the mamas or mamas to be in your life. Because as we've talked about here before, the more you know, the better. Knowledge is power. So if you feel like any of this is good, I would love for you to share it. It'd be awesome. So the first thing I want to do is talk about breastfeeding. So I think that most mamas start out, just from the research that I've read and the people that I've talked to, I think most mamas start out with the desire to breastfeed. That doesn't always work for a number of reasons, and so after breastfeeding we are going to talk about bottle and formula feeding. But let's first talk about the breastfeeding and kind of just some tips and ideas on getting prepared for that. I'd like to share what I found helpful in my breastfeeding journey with both of my daughters. And I'm really glad that I had people in my life telling me, you know, get this ready now. Don't wait until the baby comes because your brain is going to be gone and, you know, you don't want to have to think about this stuff. And I'm so glad I listened because they were right. So some of the things that I started off with that I would encourage you to consider would be a breast pump, and if you have insurance, you can check with them. A lot of times they'll actually pay for it, and it doesn't even have to be a fancy breast pump. There are handheld breast pumps that work just fine. If you're planning on staying home with your baby and not really doing a whole lot of bottles, a hand-operated pump is perfect. There's also some of the mid-level ones that you can get at like Target and Walmart, and those work great as well. If you are planning on going back to work and need, you know, a higher grade, you can get one of those as well. But I would definitely look into a breast pump because there's nothing worse than if your baby goes on a nursing strike or you're separated from your baby a little bit longer than, you know, you had intended to be, because your breasts will actually turn into boulders that are suspended by little tiny bits of tape. So every time you walk, anyway, it's nice if possible to have that breast pump. I would also encourage you to get some lanolin, which is a safe for the baby. It's not a cream, it's like a salve that you rub over your nipples because they are going to be probably kind of sore in the beginning. And that's pretty helpful. I would also look into some of their little nipple covers, and you can either get the disposable kind or you can get the kind that are washable. But in the early stages, when your body is still like, do we have one baby? Do we have 47 babies? How many are we feeding? And there's some leakage and you're like, what is going on? That will kind of help in not going through, you know, double the amount of shirts that you would, because you're gonna have baby spit up and then also the leaky boobs. So you can get those little covers, those are helpful. Another aspect of that whole leaky boob thing, there's something called lily pads, and they look like large silicone contacts. And so you just kind of go like that, and then bloop, you put them right over your breast, and then if there's a little bit of leakage, it will catch it. Now, if you're gushing, you're in trouble. But they're great for when you actually start to be brave and venture outside the house and you don't want to wear the cloth covers. A few other things would include a good nursing pillow. If you can swing it, a comfortable place to nurse, potentially a rocking chair. My husband and I invested in a rocking chair, and it has paid for itself over and over and over again, because we had 2 girls and I sit in it probably 3 times a day for the first couple of years, you know, or multiple times. So those are a few other ideas if possible. Now, the last thing I want to say is if you find yourself having difficulties, like, for example, me, I had overactive milk letdown, which we, by the way, did a video on, so we'll put the card up here if you'd like to check that out. If you have overactive milk letdown, or if there's latch problems, or if you're concerned if your baby's getting enough milk and you're not sure what's happening, I would encourage you to find a lactation consultant before you have your baby. Get their number, figure out where they're located, make sure you're all up together with the insurance and all that. So then that way, if there are problems, you don't find yourself in a panic situation of, is my baby okay? She's not eating or whatever. Then you just call the LC and you say, I need an appointment. And we actually also did a video about my experience with a lactation consultant with my second child. So that just kind of goes to show that, every baby's different, and you never know when they're going to be like, I like to latch like this, instead of the way they're supposed to latch. So anyways, just an encouragement to have that lactation consultant have their information ready to go. The next thing I want to talk about is formula feeding. Now, a few years ago, I helped one of my family members come to find the very best brand of formula that we could possibly find. She had breastfed her son, but for various reasons, it was necessary to move to formula. And she contacted me and she said, I'm overwhelmed. There are so many options. I don't know which one to go with. Like, there are a few that I don't want. And so I said, no problem. I'm type A. Give me a list and I will make you a longer one. So we spent some time together, both just kind of researching and reading about different types of formula. And the one that we walked away with and that she ended up using on her son until he no longer needed formula was a European brand called Holly. And to be perfectly honest, if I ever had the need to go to formula, it would have been something that I would have been completely comfortable feeding my daughters. Everything I read about it was pretty stellar. So that was one of the brands that I found. It's a little bit harder to get because it's European, but I would definitely feel comfortable recommending it. The next thing that I would suggest as far as formula feeding is make sure you find something that has a list of ingredients that feel okay to you. There are tons of different brands of formula on the market. Some are great, some are less than great, and what I would encourage you is to look through the list of ingredients and make sure that you're okay with what's on it. Because as I was researching formula with my family member, one of the things that's kind of stuck out in my mind was there were certain things that I was not okay with, that I wouldn't feel comfortable giving to my child. So I guess I would just work with your pediatrician and find something that feels comfortable to you based on what it's made of. The last tip on formula is that if you've gone through all the lists and you've read everything and you're still kind of like, I don't want to feed my kid any of that, I don't like any of that, or they're allergic to this, or whatever, one suggestion would be to consider making your own formula. I have a friend here where I live who ended up making her own formula for both of her children due to a particular allergy that they both have. And she said at first it felt like, she said she felt pretty hippie, because she's not hippie at all, but she said she felt kind of hippie at first, like buying, bulk of this and all this stuff. But then she said that it actually was empowering because she knew exactly what was going into her baby's formula, and she could, if she wanted to do organic, she could. And if she wanted to take out a particular piece of it, she could. I thought, wow, that's actually a really great idea, but when you think about it, I'm sure it's been done in the past because there's always been a need. Human babies have always had a need for milk, and I'm sure in the past sometimes there's been moms who haven't nursed. So anyway, I thought that was really interesting. So again, if that sounds like something you might be interested in, talk to your pediatrician, but go to Google. There's an amazing plethora of information about making your own formula. That was one of the suggestions that I made to my cousin, though due to time constraints, it didn't feel possible for her, but we found some amazing recipes. Because I don't actually have firsthand experience feeding my littles formula, I reached out to one of my best friends and asked her if she would be willing to kind of share some tips about formula. She has had the experience of both formula feeding and breastfeeding, and so it kind of gives her a unique perspective, I think, about the pros and cons, which I won't go too much into, but I did want to share a few of the nuggets of wisdom that she sent to me because I think she's got some good stuff. The first little tip she sent, which I think is amazing, is teach your baby how to take the bottle of formula at room temperature, or even maybe a slightly cool bottle. Now you might think, oh, it's supposed to be warm. Yes, this is true. But if you ever find yourself in a position where you're not around hot water, or you're not able to give your baby a hot bottle, or the temperature that they like, a warmer bottle, well then they might not take it at all. So that gives you definitely a lot more flexibility as far as being out and maybe being caught a little bit flat-footed of not having that hot water. When I asked my friend what kind of bottles she used, because if you've looked into the world of bottles, hello, it's like, Anyway, when I asked her what brand she used, because she's had 3 different babies, and she said that one of the things that she found, or the system that she found that worked the best surprisingly for all 3 of them, was the Dr. Brown's bottles. She said that they can be a little bit of a pain to clean, but she said as far as the nipples on the bottles, those were the only ones that her kids would take. And so we're looking at basically 3 different examples, because all the babies are different as far as preferences and all that. But she said that with their first daughter, they ended up buying several different brands because they didn't know what she would want, and she refused a few of them, and so they finally settled on this Dr. Brown's. Well, when she had her second and third child, she thought, great, we're going to have to buy more bottles and figure out what they like, and she tried, and both of them took to the Dr. Brown's. So she definitely recommends that type, and sounds good to me, other than being a pain to clean. But in my limited experience of cleaning bottles, I think most of them are a pain to clean. The last tip I want to share from my friend is that she said as soon as possible she started handing the baby off for at least 1 bottle with someone other than her. And for her, she said she felt like that was important because it gave her a minute, and especially when her and her husband would split the night, so she would be able to get a good solid chunk of sleep, and then her husband would do a feeding. But she said that she felt like that was really helpful because it was something that they started early on, and it just carried over. It wasn't ever this thing of having to break from tradition of always being with mom. It was just something that they did right away, that baby would take at least one bottle a day with someone else. And that gave her some freedom, I think, that as a new mom gets ripped away from us. So she said that it felt good to be able to have that moment, even if she was in the house. She could go and take a shower or sleep, whatever. So she said she felt like that was a really important aspect of the feeding relationship with her child. Now, the last thing I want to share is actually from my girlfriend, but it's a strategy that she and her husband used for when he would take the babies out when they still needed to have bottles. And I wanted to share with you because I think it's actually ingenious. She's way braver than I. So I wanted to share. I'm going to read from the list about what she shared. She said that if we ever needed to travel with breast milk, like if the hubby took babies to the park or something like that, we would put hot water in a thermos, frozen milk in a lunch cooler, and the cooler would have ice packs around it to keep the breast milk cold. And then they would fill the bottle, warm the bottle in the thermos prior to feeding, and then keep in mind that the thermos should have a wide enough mouth to drop the bottle into it for warming. So you would have the warm water, and then you'd drop it in with the breast milk, and it would all warm up just perfectly. And I thought, hello, that's an ingenious system. And again, that's just one more way for us as mamas to have a little bit of freedom, because daddies can do this stuff, grandmas and grandpas can do this stuff. It might feel a little bit, obtuse at first, but it can happen. And I think that this is an amazing way to do it. The last thing I want to talk about in the video today is solid foods. Now, we're not going to go into that too much, but I did want to give you a few tips and a few ideas to think about as far as baby's first solids. Most pediatricians are going to say that right about 6 months is the time when you can introduce baby's first solid food. Sometimes there might be suggestions that if you feed the baby, maybe like rice cereal or something like that earlier. And I'm not going to get in between doctors and what they have to say. My suggestion with that would be to just do research about feeding your baby solid foods any sooner than 4 months. There's some on one side of the camp that say, don't do it, it's not going to help, it's not going to matter. And then there's others that'll, that say something different. So once your baby hits 6 months, it's like, woohoo, it's time to start feeding them some solids. Now, I heard kind of a fun little thing, and that is food before 1 is just for fun. So keep in mind that it is important to introduce some solids about that time. You start pureeing some vegetables and fruits and that type of thing. And while it's not the nutrition so much that's important, although, that is good, my pediatrician actually explained it to me in the sense that you want to start getting them used to different tastes and textures, because right around the first year of life, when they hit that 1-year birthday, they're going to start getting hungry, and it's going to get to the point where your milk or the formula that you're feeding them isn't really going to be enough to sustain them. And if you haven't been kind of prepping them to what blended peas taste like, they're going to be like, what? There's aversions with texture and tastes and stuff like that. So it is kind of a good idea right around the 6-month mark to start introducing them to different flavors and textures and that type of thing. So what we started with both of my girls was avocado. Yay! Avocado is a superfood, and I also happen to love avocado. My husband was pretty sure that I was trying to poison them. He hates avocado, but I started off with avocado, and both of my girls loved it and actually still do, which is fine with me. So we started with avocado, and then we did, some pureed vegetables, and there's all kinds of stuff out there about purees and mixes and what to do. You go to Pinterest or you go to Google and type in baby's first food, and there's just an amazing amount of information out there about what you can give to baby. Now, the last thing I want to leave you with is one of my good friends here told me that she did something with her second child. She didn't with her first, but with her second child, her daughter, my daughter and her daughter are the same age. She told me that she waited to introduce all of the vegetables to her daughter before she introduced the fruits. What's baby going to be more interested in? A nice little chunk of steamed pear, which is sweet and tastes good, or a steamed chunk of carrot or broccoli? Now, I love vegetables, don't get me wrong, but as a baby, most of them are going to want the fruit. So her 2-year-old daughter will pick up handfuls of kale and eat kale chips, and she loves her broccoli, and she'll eat her vegetables before anything else on her plate. So apparently for her, it worked really well. So, I did fruits and vegetables, and my kid thinks vegetables are poison. So I don't know, maybe it's a good idea, something to think about anyway. Thank you so much for watching. I'd like to invite you to become a subscriber if you're not already. We put out a video every week dealing with family and kids and food and eating and nursing and all that kind of stuff, just kind of our journey into family. So we would love to have you join with us on our journey. We also have a Facebook page if you'd like to connect with us there. That would be awesome. And if you have any suggestions about what we've talked about today, any tips, any nuggets of wisdom that you'd like to leave in the comments, go ahead. I love interacting with all of you and hearing things that I haven't thought of. I love hearing about what you guys do with your families. So hopefully you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you again next week.